In the heart of a high-powered business empire, Alexander Drake, a millionaire CEO, had locked himself away from love for 2 decades. But when a fresh-faced assistant, Emma, entered his rigid world, sparks flew. As their bond deepened, long-buried emotions resurfaced, threatening everything he had carefully built. Could love be his ultimate redemption? The day began with a quiet hum in the city below, a gentle reminder that life pulsed with energy, even amidst the glass and steel towers of downtown. At the very top of one such towering edifice lay the sanctum of Drake Enterprises, an empire meticulously built by its enigmatic CEO, Alexander Drake. The office was a symphony of modern minimalism, sleek lines, cool, understated colours, and an almost clinical precision that spoke of power and control. Yet beneath this immaculate exterior lay a profound solitude that had defined Alexander's existence for 2 long decades. Seated behind an enormous mahogany desk, his eyes hidden behind dark-rimmed glasses reflecting the cityscape, Alexander exuded an air of authority. Every detail of his office, from the perfectly aligned leather-bound books to the steady hum of the air conditioning, spoke of a man who thrived on order. But order, as he had long learned, often came at a steep price. For 20 years, Alexander had built not only an empire but also an impenetrable fortress around his heart. The world outside, with its unpredictable emotions and messy connections, was one he had carefully kept at bay ever since a past tragedy had left him wary of intimacy. On this seemingly ordinary morning, however, the sterile routine of corporate life was destined for a quiet, yet irrevocable disruption. The heavy automatic doors swung open, and a soft, determined voice broke through the usual hum of the reception area. Emma had arrived, a new assistant whose presence would soon challenge everything Alexander believed about himself. She moved with a natural grace that belied her youth, an unspoken strength in her confident stride, a spark of kindness in her warm smile. There was resilience in her, a quiet fire that hinted at a past filled with hardships, each one forging her into the person she had become. As Emma stepped into the lobby, the contrast between her vibrant presence and the cold, efficient surroundings was undeniable. The walls, painted in subdued shades of grey, seemed to brighten subtly in her wake. She exchanged a polite smile with the receptionist, her gaze flickering toward the digital schedule displayed on a sleek monitor. Today was her first day. Despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach, excitement shone in her eyes, a quiet hope that this new beginning might be the chapter she had longed for. Meanwhile, in his office high above the mundane buzz of daily routine, Alexander observed the unfolding scene with detached curiosity. New faces were nothing new to him. In his world, change was constant. Yet, something about Emma, perhaps the effortless warmth in her greeting, or the genuine enthusiasm in every task she undertook, stirred something deep within him. As she made her way toward his office, the door closed softly behind her, marking the beginning of an encounter neither of them had anticipated. "Good morning, Mr. Drake," Emma said, her voice steady yet touched with warmth. Her eyes met his with an earnest sincerity, a stark contrast to the guarded expressions of those who usually frequented these halls. "I'm Emma Carter, your new assistant. I'm looking forward to working with you." Alexander's gaze lingered on her a moment longer than usual, a fleeting glimpse into a vulnerability he had almost forgotten existed. "Welcome, Emma," he replied, his tone measured. Yet beneath it lay an unspoken acknowledgement of something stirring within him. "I trust you'll find your time here, both challenging and rewarding." As the day unfolded, something curious happened. Emma's presence, though subtle, began to infuse the sterile corridors with life. Between brief interactions over files and schedules, she shared small anecdotes about her past, stories of resilience, of hope born from adversity, and somehow, in those moments, their conversations veered gently beyond the mundane details of corporate logistics. Alexander found himself drawn into her narrative. With her soft-spoken confidence and unwavering empathy, Emma was unknowingly dismantling the walls he had so carefully built around his heart. Throughout the morning, Alexander caught himself watching her delicate fingers moving with purpose over the keyboard, her eyes focused yet kind, the way she offered a reassuring word to a stressed colleague. Each interaction, no matter how fleeting, chipped away at the icy reserve he had maintained for so long. He remembered a time when the touch of another human being had brought warmth and joy. Now, faced with Emma's genuine care, he felt that long-dormant ember begin to glow once more. In that quiet office, surrounded by the trappings of success and solitude, an unspoken promise took root. Perhaps power and profit were not the only paths to fulfillment. Emma's presence was a reminder of something he had long forgotten: the beauty of human connection, a beacon of hope, a whisper of possibilities beyond the rigid confines of his meticulously ordered life. For the first time in years, as the clock neared noon, Alexander felt something unexpected: anticipation. And in that moment of silent transformation, the seeds of change were sown. Outside, the world continued its relentless march, oblivious to the personal revolution unfolding in the heart of one of its most powerful men. In the delicate interplay between isolation and connection, between the past's haunting echoes and the hopeful whispers of a new beginning, Alexander Drake and Emma Carter had taken the first tentative steps on a journey that would change everything. As the morning unfolded into a symphony of quiet corporate routine, a sudden disturbance rippled through the calm of Drake Enterprises. The digital clock on the wall ticked steadily, its rhythm unbroken, until an abrupt error message flashed across the large conference room screen, sending murmurs of concern through the gathered team. A crucial board meeting was moments away, and the presentation detailing a groundbreaking merger was now in jeopardy. In the midst of this rising tension, Emma moved with a focused determination. Without a moment's hesitation, she swiftly connected her laptop to the projector, her fingers dancing over the keys as she navigated through backup files and alternative presentation slides. Her eyes, alight with quiet confidence, scanned the room and the flurry of anxious faces. Every move she made was deliberate, a testament to her resourcefulness under pressure. Alexander, seated at the head of the conference table, felt an unexpected stirring deep within him. He watched Emma with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. In the controlled world he had meticulously constructed, her spontaneous act of calm and competence was a ripple in his otherwise undisturbed pond. For a fleeting moment, the rigid lines of his past softened, and he recalled a time when he had been open to such unscripted moments of connection. A soft murmur of relief spread through the room as Emma's efforts began to bear fruit. The backup presentation came to life on the screen, and the meeting proceeded without further interruption. Yet, it was not just the crisis that had been averted. It was also a window into Emma's character. Alexander found himself captivated not only by her technical skill, but by the compassion that shone through when she briefly glanced at a visibly flustered junior colleague, offering a reassuring smile and a few kind words. After the meeting, as the room emptied and the tension slowly ebbed away, Alexander excused himself and walked over to Emma's desk. The corridors, still buzzing with the adrenaline of the near mishap, seemed to fall into a hushed reverence as he approached her. He paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts, a mixture of professional gratitude and something more profound that he had long buried. "Emma," he began, his voice lower than usual, "I wanted to thank you for your quick thinking today. You saved the meeting." His tone carried a sincerity that was rare in his carefully curated world. Emma looked up, her eyes reflecting a gentle surprise and a spark of pride. "Thank you, Mr. Drake. I just did what I had to, and I'm glad everything worked out." Her response was warm and unassuming. yet it resonated with a genuine desire to help, a desire that Alexander found increasingly disarming. In that quiet moment, as they stood amidst the aftermath of the crisis, Alexander felt an unusual flutter in his chest. The familiar walls of detachment he had so carefully constructed began to waver. He couldn't help but notice the soft curve of her smile, the earnestness in her gaze, and the way her eyes seemed to hold a reservoir of unspoken stories. For the first time in 2 decades, he was acutely aware of the possibility that someone could reach him, even in the midst of chaos. Later that afternoon, as the office resumed its hum of activity, Alexander retreated to his private office. He sat at his desk staring out at the cityscape, yet his mind was not on the skyline. Instead, memories surfaced. A time when laughter and connection had been as routine as the sunrise, before tragedy and heartbreak had forced him into isolation. His heart, long encased in a fortress of self-reliance, now beat with the slow, rhythmic promise of change. In the quiet solitude of his office, the echoes of the day's events played over in his mind. He remembered the gentle cadence of Emma's voice, the calm assurance in her eyes, and that fleeting yet powerful moment when her smile had reached out to him in a silent invitation. A reminder that vulnerability need not be a weakness. In that instance, the sharp edges of his guarded soul began to blur, replaced by the soft hues of possibility. The next morning, as Emma arrived once again with her characteristic grace and optimism, Alexander found himself waiting in the corridor, a rare deviation from his usual preference for solitude. When their eyes met, there was a shared understanding, an unspoken acknowledgement of the change that had begun to take root. Emma's smile was gentle, and Alexander's was tentative yet genuine, a silent promise of the connection that was growing between them. That day, during a brief lull in the hectic pace of corporate life, they found a quiet moment together, in a secluded corner of the office, away from the clamour of routine tasks. Alexander and Emma sat together on a modern bench by a large window overlooking the bustling street below. The city's vibrant life served as a stark contrast to the internal stillness they both felt. "Do you ever wonder?" Alexander asked softly, his eyes reflecting a vulnerability rarely seen. "If there's more to life than the endless pursuit of success?" His words were tentative, as if he were testing the waters of a long-forgotten emotion. Emma regarded him thoughtfully. "I believe there is," she replied, her voice warm and steady. "Sometimes, it takes a moment of chaos to remind us of what truly matters: connection, kindness, and the courage to open up to the unknown." Her words resonated with him deeply, stirring memories of a life once filled with hope and love, now dulled by years of self-imposed isolation. In that shared silence, a fragile bridge formed between them, one built on mutual respect, the acknowledgement of shared human frailty, and the promise of renewal. As the day turned to dusk, the glow of the setting sun bathed the office in soft amber light. Alexander stood by the window long after Emma had returned to her work, absorbing the warmth of the fading day. He realized that the events of the day had done more than just resolve a technical glitch. They had ignited a spark of hope in a heart long resigned to solitude. The incident, small yet profound, had set in motion a transformation that neither Alexander nor Emma could have foreseen. In the space between professional duty and personal vulnerability, a quiet revolution was taking place, a revolution that promised to shatter old barriers and usher in a future defined not by fear, but by the tender power of genuine human connection. And so, with the memory of Emma's compassion and the echo of her words lingering in his heart, Alexander Drake took his first step toward a new beginning, one where the promise of love and the courage to feel deeply could, perhaps, heal the scars of the past. As days turned into weeks, the once sterile corridors of Drake Enterprises began to harbor subtle hints of warmth and laughter, a warmth that was slowly but surely seeping into the cold heart of its CEO, Alexander Drake. Late evenings in the office became their unspoken sanctuary, a time when the rigid rules of business softened into whispered conversations and shared confidences. One such evening found Alexander working late in his expansive office, the glow of the city lights spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The hum of computers and the soft rustling of papers were the only companions in his world of precision. He was immersed in reviewing financial reports, a task that once filled him with a sense of purpose. But tonight, his mind kept wandering back to Emma. He could still picture her gentle smile, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her dreams, and the reassuring calm that enveloped her even during moments of crisis. A soft knock at the door startled him. "Come in," he called, his voice echoing slightly in the spacious room. Emma stepped in carrying a stack of documents and a thermos of herbal tea, a small, thoughtful gesture that spoke of care. "I thought you might like a break," she said, setting the tea down on his desk. There was no grand overture in her entrance, just a quiet sincerity that resonated deep within him. "Thank you, Emma," Alexander replied, his tone softer than usual. As she poured the tea, the act felt almost symbolic, a small thaw in the ice that had long guarded his heart. That night, between sips of warm tea and the rustle of turning pages, they began to peel back the layers of their carefully constructed personas. Emma's gentle questions invited Alexander to share memories he had long suppressed. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he spoke of a time when his world was filled with laughter and the gentle touch of a loved one. A time before betrayal and heartbreak had forced him to retreat into solitude. He recalled an evening much like this one, where the promise of a shared future had glimmered brightly, only to be snuffed out by unforeseen tragedy. His voice trembled slightly as he remembered the warmth of a hand that had once held his, the laughter that had echoed in quiet rooms, and the silent promises that were made in the tender hours of twilight. Emma listened intently, her eyes reflecting both empathy and a quiet understanding that transcended words. As Alexander recounted these memories, a parallel story began to unfold in Emma's mind. She remembered her own battles with loss and longing, growing up in a small town where dreams were as fragile as the morning dew. Emma had once believed that love was a luxury, something that could only thrive in the pages of a fairy tale. Yet, life had taught her that hope often came dressed in ordinary moments. A kind gesture, a shared smile, a moment of quiet understanding between two souls. Now, as she sat across from Alexander, she realized that their connection was more than mere coincidence. It was the convergence of two wounded hearts searching for solace in each other. Over the following weeks, their bond deepened through countless small moments. During one late-night work session, while the office was bathed in the soft glow of a solitary desk lamp, Emma hesitated before asking, "Do you ever think that maybe there's more to life than just numbers and meetings?" Her question, simple yet profound, hung in the air like a promise of something unspoken. Alexander looked up from his reports, his eyes reflecting a flicker of surprise. "I used to believe that," he admitted slowly, "before life taught me that vulnerability comes at a cost." His confession was quiet, almost a whisper against the backdrop of the ticking clock. Emma's gaze softened. "Vulnerability isn't always a weakness, Alexander. Sometimes it's the very thing that makes us human, capable of love, of connection, of healing." There was an undeniable warmth in her voice, a genuine belief that even the most guarded souls could find redemption in the light of shared emotion. Their conversations often meandered between personal revelations and the mundane realities of corporate life. In the break room over cups of coffee that had long grown cold on the counter, they exchanged stories of childhood dreams, whispered hopes for the future, and silent regrets that lingered in the corners of their memories. Alexander found himself anticipating these moments, his heart inexplicably lighter whenever Emma was near. Yet, even as the connection deepened, an undercurrent of conflict began to surface, a tension born of past wounds and unspoken fears. There were nights when the air between them seemed charged with a quiet electricity. On one such night, as a storm raged outside the office windows, the power flickered, casting long shadows across the room. They found themselves huddled together near a single lit lamp, the distant rumble of thunder punctuating the silence. In that dim light, their eyes met in a way that was both hesitant and full of promise. The space between them shrank until it was measured not in inches, but in the unspoken yearning that pulsed between their hearts. For a fleeting moment, Alexander reached out as if to bridge the gap, his hand hovering near Emma's. But then, as if caught in a silent battle with his own fears, he retracted, leaving the air thick with unfulfilled longing. Emma's eyes searched his, and in that brief, charged pause, the complexity of their connection was laid bare. There was the allure of intimacy, a promise of healing and shared passion, but also the looming spectre of past heartbreaks that threatened to undo the fragile bond they had so carefully nurtured. In the days that followed, subtle doubts began to creep into Alexander's mind. Late at night, after the office had emptied and silence reigned, he would find himself alone with his thoughts, replaying the moments of connection over and over. Memories of betrayal and loss clashed with the warmth he felt in Emma's presence. He questioned whether he was truly ready to let someone in, to risk the delicate equilibrium of his carefully ordered life. The fear of repeating past mistakes was a constant companion, a shadow that lurked behind every smile, every shared secret. Emma too wrestled with her own internal conflicts, while her heart yearned for the possibility of a deep, abiding love with Alexander. She was haunted by echoes of a past relationship that had left scars too raw to forget. The caution that came with those memories made her hesitate, even as her spirit clashed against the confines of her own insecurities. Every lingering glance and every unspoken word was both a promise and a challenge, a silent dare to trust, to risk, and, ultimately, to heal. One chilly evening, after a long day of navigating both corporate challenges and personal introspection, the tension reached its peak. Alexander and Emma found themselves alone in the quiet confines of the company's private lounge. The room, adorned with soft music and the gentle glow of candlelight, felt removed from the cold rigidity of the day. As they sat across from each other in plush armchairs, the air seemed to pulse with a shared anticipation. "I can't help but wonder," Alexander began, his voice low and earnest, "if I've spent so long guarding myself that I've forgotten what it feels like to truly live." His eyes, usually so controlled and measured, betrayed a flicker of raw vulnerability. "I'm terrified of being hurt again, of letting someone in, only to have it all come crashing down." Emma's heart ached at the honesty in his words. She reached out, her hand gently covering his. "I understand," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I too have been afraid. But sometimes the risk is worth it, if it means finding someone who sees you, truly sees you, for all that you are." Her touch was both a balm and a challenge, a silent invitation to step beyond the safety of isolation and embrace the uncertainty of love. In that moment, the room seemed to shrink around them, leaving only the truth of their shared desires and fears. As the night deepened, their conversation wove between the present and the past. Alexander recounted more of the painful memories that had driven him into solitude, losses that had cut deeper than any financial setback ever could. Emma shared her own story of heartbreak, of dreams deferred, and a spirit bruised by life's relentless trials. Each confession, each tear that glistened in the candlelight, was a step toward dismantling the barriers that had kept them apart. Yet, even as the walls around their hearts crumbled, the spectre of their internal conflicts loomed large. Every time Alexander's eyes shone with a hint of vulnerability, Emma felt both drawn to him and compelled to protect the fragile bond they were forging. Every time her hand brushed his, there was a silent question in the contact, a question of whether it was safe to trust, to hope, and to dream. In the quiet aftermath of that emotional night, as the first light of dawn began to break through the horizon, both Alexander and Emma sat in reflective silence. They were bound together by an unspoken promise, a promise that, despite the risks and the lingering scars of the past, they would face the future together. The delicate dance of connection had revealed both the beauty of their shared humanity and the painful truths of their pasts. For Alexander, the journey toward opening his heart was just beginning. In Emma's eyes, he saw the possibility of redemption, a chance to reclaim the parts of himself that had been buried beneath layers of guarded indifference. For Emma, Alexander represented both a challenge and a beacon, a man whose strength was matched only by the tenderness that he had long hidden away. As they parted ways that morning, the memory of their shared intimacy lingered, a quiet echo of the night's revelations. The office, once a symbol of isolation and cold efficiency, now pulsed with the promise of renewal. In every shared glance, every hesitant smile, and every moment of quiet understanding, the seeds of a profound transformation had been sown. And so, as the sun rose over the city, casting long shadows over the corridors of Drake Enterprises, Alexander and Emma continued their delicate, unfolding journey. A journey marked by moments of passion and uncertainty, by memories of loss and glimmers of hope. Each step forging a path toward a future where love, in all its messy, beautiful vulnerability, might finally heal the wounds of the past. The once gentle hum of routine at Drake Enterprises now pulsed with an undercurrent of tension and anticipation. Over the past few weeks, the subtle warmth that Emma had brought into Alexander's life had begun to blossom into a delicate intimacy. Yet, just as a tender bud begins to unfurl, unforeseen forces conspired to test the fragile connection they'd nurtured. It was a brisk autumn morning when the boardroom was filled with an air of urgency. Today, Drake Enterprises was set to finalize a high-stakes merger, one that could secure the company's future for years to come. As Alexander prepared to address the board, a series of alarming messages began to flood in from his senior advisors. Financial discrepancies, unexpected audit discrepancies, and a potential leak of sensitive data all pointed to a corporate crisis of unprecedented scale. Whispers of sabotage and internal betrayal swirled among the executives, casting a shadow over the day's proceedings. In the midst of this storm, Emma found herself summoned to a crisis meeting with Alexander and the board. As she stepped into the sleek glass-walled room, she could sense the electric tension in the air. Faces that usually carried an air of polished professionalism now wore expressions of suspicion and unease. Among the murmurs, one name emerged repeatedly, a name that sent ripples of disquiet. Miranda Cole, a cunning senior executive with ambitions as sharp as her tailored suits. Miranda's discreet glances and sly half-smiles had, until now, been nothing more than the background noise of corporate politics. Today, however, her demeanor hinted at a calculated design. Alexander's voice, usually so measured and resolute, trembled slightly as he addressed the room. "We stand on the brink of a merger that could redefine our future," he began, his gaze darting across the assembled board members. "But we are facing discrepancies in our financial reports that cannot be ignored." His words hung heavy in the air, laden with both determination and uncertainty. As the discussion deepened, Miranda's insinuations began to take on a more personal tone. "Mr. Drake, isn't it true that in the wake of your personal transformation, certain confidential communications were left unsecured?" she asked, her tone dripping with feigned concern. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned toward Emma, who sat beside Alexander with a calm expression that belied the storm raging within her. A murmur ran through the board as doubts were sown. Emma's recent closeness to Alexander, a closeness that had blossomed from shared late-night confidences and whispered dreams, now became the fodder for scandal. In hushed corridors and behind closed doors, rumours began to circulate that Emma's influence had led to breaches in protocol, that her emotional entanglement with the CEO had clouded his judgment, and even that her loyalty to the company might be compromised. The delicate tapestry of trust they had been weaving now appeared to be unravelling, thread by painful thread. After the meeting, Alexander retreated to his private office, the weight of betrayal and uncertainty pressing heavily upon him. He sat behind his imposing desk, his mind a tumult of conflicting emotions. The board's skepticism gnawed at him. Had his personal vulnerability been exploited by those he trusted? And most agonizing of all, could the very presence of the one person who had rekindled a long-dormant hope within him be the catalyst for his undoing? Emma, meanwhile, sought solace in the quiet of the empty corridors. As she walked briskly through the dimly lit hallways, each step echoed with the doubt that now threatened to overshadow her gentle spirit. The whispers, the sideways glances, and the insinuations were not just corporate gossip. They were personal indictments, questioning her integrity and her role in Alexander's transformation. Deep inside, a well of insecurity began to stir. Memories of past betrayals, the wounds left by a previous love that had crumbled under the weight of distrust, resurfaced, threatening to shatter the delicate balance of hope she had cultivated in her heart. Later that afternoon, fate forced the two of them together once more. Alexander found Emma in the quiet of the executive lounge, her eyes fixed on the rain streaking down the window. The storm outside seemed to mirror the turmoil within him. Without preamble, he approached, his steps heavy with the burden of leadership and personal heartache. "Emma," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need to understand. Were you involved in any way with these discrepancies? Have you ever compromised the trust of this company?" His words were laced with both accusation and a desperate need for reassurance, a vulnerability he had long hidden behind layers of corporate armor. Emma's eyes widened, a mixture of hurt and indignation flaring within them. "Alexander, how can you even suggest that?" she replied, her tone trembling as she fought to maintain her composure. "I have dedicated myself entirely to this role, and to you. Everything I've done has been with the company's best interests at heart." Her voice, though firm, wavered with the pain of being questioned on the one subject she held most dear. For a long, agonizing moment, the space between them was filled only with the sound of rain and the unspoken doubts that threatened to drive them apart. Alexander's face contorted with internal conflict. "It's not just about trust, Emma," he confessed, his eyes searching hers for the truth. "It's about the way the board sees us. They're saying that our closeness has blurred the lines between personal and professional, and that your influence might be dangerous." His admission, painful in its honesty, cut through the charged silence. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she absorbed his words. Every beat echoed the fear of losing not just her job, but the connection that had become her anchor in this turbulent world. "I never intended to cross any lines, Alexander," she said softly, her voice heavy with sorrow. "I only ever wanted to help, both you and the company. I thought you understood that my feelings for you were genuine, not a weakness." Her admission was a plea for trust, a desperate attempt to bridge the growing chasm between them. At that moment, the storm outside intensified, as if nature itself mourned the rift opening in their bond. Alexander's eyes clouded with regret and uncertainty. "I do understand, Emma," he murmured, his tone laden with remorse. "I wanted to believe that too. But now I'm caught between the need to protect what we have and the demands of a company that fears our vulnerability." His confession revealed the deep-seated conflict raging within him, the battle between the cautious protector of his legacy and the man who had dared to embrace love once again. The days that followed were fraught with tension. At work, Miranda's quiet machinations grew bolder, her insinuations more pointed. In hushed meetings and through furtive glances, she stoked the flames of doubt. The board began to question not only the financial integrity of Drake Enterprises, but also the wisdom of intertwining personal emotions with corporate governance. Every email, every overheard conversation was now a potential weapon in a silent war that threatened to dismantle the foundation of trust Alexander had spent years building. In the midst of this corporate battle, the personal stakes became ever clearer. Emma found herself isolated. Colleagues who had once exchanged friendly smiles now avoided her gaze, and whispers trailed in her wake like unwelcome shadows. Each passing moment chipped away at her confidence, leaving her to question whether the price of vulnerability was simply too high. In the solitude of her small, neatly arranged apartment, Emma would replay the day's events, her mind a storm of doubts. Was her love for Alexander a beacon of hope, or had it inadvertently become the catalyst for his, and her, destruction? One evening, as twilight bled into the darkness, Alexander and Emma met in the quiet corner of a modest rooftop garden atop the corporate headquarters, a rare haven away from prying eyes. The city lights twinkled like distant promises, and the cool breeze whispered secrets of possibilities, yet unrealized. There, beneath the vast expanse of a starlit sky, the weight of the day's trials seemed momentarily suspended. "Emma," Alexander began, his voice trembling with raw emotion. "I'm so sorry for doubting you. This crisis, it's not your fault. I allowed the board's fears, Miranda's insinuations, and my own doubts to overshadow what matters most." His eyes glistened with unshed tears, the vulnerability of the moment laid bare for her to see. Emma's own eyes shimmered with both relief and lingering hurt. "Alexander, I've never wanted to be the cause of this turmoil," she whispered, reaching out to gently clasp his hand. "I only ever wished to bring light into your life. But if our closeness is now seen as a liability, how do we navigate this storm without losing ourselves?" Her voice was a fragile blend of hope and despair, a plea for understanding amid the chaos. For a long, breathless moment, they simply held each other, the silence speaking louder than any words. In that embrace, the turbulent forces of external pressures and internal conflicts seemed to recede, replaced by the undeniable truth of their shared humanity. Their connection, raw, unpolished, and achingly real, offered a glimpse of salvation in a world intent on punishing vulnerability. Yet, even as the night offered a brief respite, the future remained uncertain. The corporate crisis was far from over, and the board's skepticism still loomed like a dark cloud over Drake Enterprises. But on that rooftop, under the watchful gaze of 1,000 stars, Alexander and Emma vowed to fight, not only for the integrity of the company, but for the love that had blossomed in the most unexpected of places. In the days that followed, as they navigated boardroom battles and whispered conspiracies, both Alexander and Emma learned that true intimacy required courage, a willingness to stand together in the face of formidable obstacles, to trust in the strength of their bond even when the world around them seemed intent on tearing it apart. And while the scars of doubt and fear had not yet fully healed, each shared glance and tender word was a step toward reclaiming the hope that had once seemed lost. Thus, in the crucible of crisis, as the forces of ambition and betrayal collided with the purity of newfound love, Alexander and Emma began to understand that the path to redemption was never easy. It was paved with moments of vulnerability, battles fought in quiet corridors, and promises whispered beneath starlight. And in that understanding lay the seed of a transformation, a promise that even amid the deepest obstacles, love could emerge, radiant and resilient, ready to heal the wounds of the past and illuminate the uncertain road ahead. That fateful evening, as the corporate storm reached its peak and the weight of whispered conspiracies pressed heavily on his shoulders, Alexander found himself alone in the quiet of his penthouse, a sanctuary of solitude perched high above the chaos of Drake Enterprises. The city sprawled below in a tapestry of glittering lights and restless energy, but in the silence of his private study, every sound felt amplified. The soft hum of the air conditioner, the distant murmur of traffic, and the rapid thump of his own heart. Alexander sat at a long, dark wooden table cluttered with financial reports and legal memos. His mind was a battlefield of conflicting emotions, the need to protect his legacy, the fear of losing everything he'd built, and the irresistible pull of the connection he had begun to share with Emma. That connection had become his secret lifeline, one that illuminated the darkest corners of his guarded heart. Yet now, with the board's doubts and the insidious machinations of Miranda threatening to shatter that fragile hope, Alexander felt utterly isolated. As the clock ticked relentlessly, a sudden surge of adrenaline forced him to stand and pace. Memories, painful and bittersweet, raced through his mind: lost love, the sting of betrayal, and the years of self-imposed exile from intimacy. With every step he took, he could almost hear the echo of a life he had once known, a life filled with laughter, passion, and a love that had warmed his soul. But that life had receded into a distant past, a realm he no longer dared to inhabit. The relentless pressure became unbearable. In a moment of raw vulnerability, Alexander found himself in front of a full-length mirror. His eyes, usually so cold and calculating, now shimmered with unshed tears. The fortress he had built around his heart was crumbling, and he realized that the price of isolation was far too high. The truth surged up unbidden. If he continued down this lonely path, he would lose not only his empire, but also the only spark of hope that had ever made him feel truly alive. At that very moment, as if summoned by the intensity of his emotions, a soft knock echoed through the silent room. Alexander hesitated before opening the door. There, standing in the dim hallway with the gentle patter of rain visible through the glass pane, was Emma. Her eyes were filled with concern and unwavering determination, and the soft glow of the corridor light bathed her in a halo of compassion. Without waiting for an invitation, she stepped inside, her presence steady and comforting. "Alexander," she began softly, her voice laced with worry and tenderness. "I couldn't leave you alone tonight. I know there's so much pain behind that guarded look of yours." Her words, simple yet profound, struck a chord deep within him. In that instant, all the doubts, the boardroom accusations, and the relentless pressure of corporate warfare seemed to fade away. Only the truth remained. He was drowning in the loneliness he had nurtured for so long, and Emma was the lifebuoy he never dared to grasp. With trembling hands and a raw, aching vulnerability, Alexander reached out to her. "Emma, His voice faltered as years of suppressed emotions spilled forth. "I've spent so long building walls around my heart, believing that I could shield myself from pain. But tonight, I see that those walls have imprisoned me instead. I'm terrified of being hurt again, of trusting someone with all I have. But I can't live like this anymore. I need you." For a moment, time seemed to slow. Emma's eyes softened, and she stepped closer, closing the distance between them until there was nothing but the truth in their shared silence. "I've always been here, Alexander," she whispered, her voice trembling with both hope and empathy. "I believe that vulnerability is not a weakness, it's the doorway to love. And I love you, not just the powerful man you are, but the wounded soul that longs for healing." The admission, spoken with heartfelt sincerity, broke through the dam of his restraint. In that dimly lit room, with the city's lights dancing distantly beyond the window and the soft rhythm of the rain as their only witness, Alexander allowed himself to let go. Tears glistened on his cheeks as he stepped forward, embracing Emma with an intensity that spoke of years of loneliness finally finding solace. Their embrace was tender yet passionate, a silent vow to confront the scars of the past and to reclaim the parts of themselves they had long buried. As they held each other, the world outside receded into insignificance. In the safety of that embrace, Alexander revealed the truth of his heart, the pain of lost opportunities, the regret of never having felt love's warm touch for decades, and the quiet desperation to change his fate. Emma, in turn, shared her own journey of resilience, of a life filled with challenges, yet illuminated by the belief that love could transform even the deepest wounds. The conversation, punctuated by soft words and gentle caresses, deepened into a confession that neither had anticipated but both desperately needed. Alexander spoke of nights spent haunted by memories and the fear that any opening in his emotional armor would leave him vulnerable to the cruelty of the world. Emma confessed that her love for him was not born of naivete, but of a profound understanding of pain and the promise of healing through shared vulnerability. "I've been so afraid," Alexander murmured, his voice breaking as he clutched Emma's hand. "Afraid that if I let you in, I'd lose control, and worse, lose myself. But tonight, with you, I feel more alive than I have in years. You make me want to believe in second chances." Emma's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she responded. "And I've never wanted anything more than to stand by your side, to help mend what's been broken, and to show you that true strength lies in embracing our vulnerabilities together." Their exchange, raw and unguarded, was the climax of everything that had built up over weeks of tension, misunderstandings, and whispered fears. In that intimate moment, the tumult of the outside world, the board's suspicions, Miranda's relentless schemes, and the ever-looming threat of corporate ruin was momentarily forgotten. What remained was a profound, transformative realization that the courage to love, to be vulnerable, and to embrace the unpredictable beauty of life was the only path to redemption. With the final vestiges of their emotional armor shattered, Alexander and Emma shared a kiss that was both tender and fierce, a melding of two hearts that had weathered storms alone and were now ready to face the future together. The kiss was not just an act of passion but a promise, a pledge to fight for their love, to protect each other from the inevitable challenges of the world, and to finally allow the healing power of intimacy to mend the scars of a lifetime. In that climactic union, under the quiet watch of the midnight sky and the gentle lullaby of falling rain, the journey of transformation reached its peak. Alexander, once a solitary titan bound by fear, now stood exposed yet unafraid, ready to risk everything for the love that had rekindled a long-dormant light within him. And Emma, with her unwavering faith in the power of human connection, became the beacon guiding him back to a life filled with hope, passion, and the promise of endless possibilities. Their embrace, deep and resolute, signified more than just the merging of two souls. It was the birth of a new chapter, where vulnerability and love would forever be intertwined, transforming pain into beauty and loneliness into the tender intimacy of shared dreams. In the soft light of early morning, as the tumult of the previous night began to ebb away, a sense of calm settled over the once turbulent corridors of Drake Enterprises. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind a quiet clarity that mirrored the newfound intimacy between Alexander and Emma. Their shared vulnerability the night before had not only altered the landscape of their hearts, but had also started to thaw the frigid atmosphere within the company. The following day, Alexander awoke with a heaviness in his chest, that was now tinged with hope rather than despair. He sat by the floor-to-ceiling window in his private office, watching as the city slowly stirred to life. The familiar hum of early commuters and distant car horns now served as a gentle reminder that each day held the promise of renewal. With deliberate care, he reached for a worn leather journal, its pages filled with memories of past regrets and long-forgotten dreams, and began to write. The act of putting pen to paper became a silent confession, a way to honor the raw emotions that had resurfaced and to chart a new course for his future. Later that morning, in a quiet corner of the office lounge, Emma was already waiting with a tentative smile that radiated warmth and understanding. The light filtering through the stained glass windows painted the room in hues of gold and amber, as if the very atmosphere wished to embrace the healing taking place. She had prepared 2 cups of herbal tea, a small yet meaningful gesture that symbolized her commitment to nurturing not just their relationship, but also the hope that had been rekindled within Alexander. "Good morning," she greeted softly, her voice a gentle melody that calmed the residual echoes of the night's intensity. "Good morning," Alexander replied, his tone reflective and tender. As he accepted the tea, their hands brushed for a fleeting second, a silent affirmation of the promise they had made to one another. In that moment, the office, once a battleground of corporate ambition and whispered doubts, transformed into a sanctuary of genuine connection. Over the next few days, as the duo navigated the delicate process of rebuilding trust, the corridors of Drake Enterprises began to echo with subtle signs of change. Alexander, emboldened by Emma's unwavering presence, began addressing the board with a newfound openness about the challenges they faced. While the external pressures had not vanished entirely, he made it clear that his personal transformation was inseparable from the evolution of the company itself. His speeches, once measured and detached, now carried a heartfelt conviction that resonated with both employees and skeptical board members alike. During quieter moments after the flurry of board meetings and strategic sessions, Alexander and Emma would retreat to a hidden nook on the upper terrace, a small, verdant garden that had long been neglected amidst the towering steel structures. Here, away from the relentless scrutiny of corporate life, they rediscovered the simple pleasures of shared solitude. Surrounded by blooming flowers and the gentle rustle of leaves, they talked about their dreams, their fears, and the small yet significant joys that life could offer. In these stolen moments, the painful memories of isolation were gradually replaced by the promise of healing and the thrill of new beginnings. One evening, as dusk settled over the city, Alexander invited Emma to join him for a walk along the quiet, tree-lined boulevard near the office. The sky, a deep canvas of twilight blues and purples, provided the perfect backdrop for their contemplative conversation. Hand in hand, they strolled slowly, savouring the gentle rhythm of their footsteps and the quiet intimacy of the night. Alexander found himself sharing stories he had never dared to speak aloud. The weight of his past losses, the burden of the walls he had built to shield himself from further pain, and the quiet desperation that had once defined his every waking moment. Emma listened intently, her eyes reflecting both empathy and a fierce determination to help him find light amid the lingering shadows. "You don't have to carry that burden alone anymore," she murmured, squeezing his hand reassuringly. "Every scar tells a story, and every story deserves a chance to heal." Her words, simple yet profound, resonated deeply within him. In Emma's unwavering gaze, Alexander saw not just the promise of love, but also the gentle strength that could mend even the deepest wounds. It was as if the very act of sharing his vulnerabilities allowed him to begin dismantling the fortress he had so meticulously constructed, a fortress that, until now, had kept him isolated from the warmth of genuine connection. Back at the office, the gradual shift in Alexander's demeanour did not go unnoticed. Colleagues who had once whispered behind closed doors began to observe a man transformed, one who now led with both wisdom and compassion. While the corporate challenges still loomed, the pervasive sense of isolation had given way to a more human, relatable leadership. Emma's presence, far from being a liability, was celebrated as a catalyst for positive change, a symbol of the transformative power of embracing one's true self. As the days turned into weeks, the healing process continued in quiet, steady increments. The sharp edges of past betrayals softened under the gentle influence of trust and shared understanding. Alexander's once impenetrable armor now bore the marks of a battle fought and won. The scars, while still visible, served as reminders of the strength required to be vulnerable. Emma, ever the beacon of hope and resilience, stood by him through every challenge, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. In the serene solitude of a late autumn evening, as the first leaves began to fall and the air took on a crisp clarity, Alexander and Emma found themselves alone in the office's expansive atrium. The fading light played upon their faces, illuminating the quiet determination in Alexander's eyes and the soft, unwavering compassion in Emma's smile. It was here that they shared one final heartfelt conversation, a conversation that encapsulated the journey from despair to hope, from isolation to healing. "Thank you for showing me that I can still feel," Alexander whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I never imagined that after all these years I could open my heart again." Emma's response was a tender caress against his cheek, her eyes glistening with unshed tears of joy and relief. "And thank you for trusting me with your heart, even when it was shattered. Together we're building something beautiful, a future where love and hope guide every step." In that intimate moment, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the atrium and the soft murmur of a rejuvenating world outside, Alexander and Emma embraced the reality of their transformation. Their journey of healing was far from over, but with every shared smile, every whispered word of encouragement, and every gentle touch, they were rewriting the narrative of their lives. The painful echoes of the past had begun to fade, replaced by the tender promise of a new beginning. A beginning where vulnerability was not a weakness, but the very essence of a love that could heal even the deepest wounds. In the gentle afterglow of every storm, there comes a quiet promise of renewal. For Alexander and Emma, that promise had finally blossomed into reality. With the corporate turbulence now behind them, and the doubts of the board slowly receding like mist under the morning sun, a new era dawned both in the corridors of Drake Enterprises and in the hearts of its two most unlikely champions. The change was palpable. Alexander's once impenetrable office now radiated warmth, not just from the soft, ambient lighting, but from a transformation that was etched into every gesture and every word he spoke. Gone were the days when the weight of his legacy and past sorrows held him captive. Instead, he now moved with a quiet confidence and an openness that inspired not only his colleagues, but also himself. The board, once suspicious of the intertwining of business and personal life, gradually came to see the brilliance of his newfound approach. With Emma by his side, his leadership became a testament to the power of vulnerability and the strength that lies in embracing one's true self. One crisp, golden afternoon, Alexander invited Emma to join him on a stroll through the meticulously landscaped gardens that bordered the headquarters. The gardens, newly revitalized as part of the company's efforts to foster a more inclusive and supportive work environment, now symbolized the very essence of their journey. Amid vibrant bursts of color from blossoming flowers and the gentle rustling of leaves in the soft breeze, the two found solace in the simple beauty of nature, a beauty that mirrored the tender rejuvenation in their hearts. Hand in hand, they walked along winding paths that curved gracefully through shaded alcoves and open meadows. The sky above was a brilliant canvas of blues and whites, and as they ambled side by side, The lingering doubts of the past seemed to dissolve into the light. Alexander paused near a small fountain, its water dancing to a quiet, rhythmic melody. Looking into Emma's eyes, he spoke softly. "I used to believe that success meant keeping my heart locked away. But with you, I've learned that true strength is found in letting love in, even if it means facing my deepest fears." Emma's smile was tender and filled with the warmth of understanding. "Every moment we've shared has been a step toward healing," she replied. "We've faced storms together, and look how far we've come. You deserve to live fully, to love without restraint." Her words, gentle yet resolute, were a balm to the wounds of a past that had once seemed insurmountable. Their conversation meandered like the garden paths, reflecting on past trials, celebrating small victories, and dreaming aloud about a future that promised both personal fulfillment and professional excellence. In that moment, the barriers between corporate duty and heartfelt passion blurred into insignificance. The transformation in Alexander was not a fleeting emotion, but a profound awakening. A recognition that success was measured not solely in monetary achievements, but in the quality of one's relationships and the courage to be emotionally present. Back at the office, the positive ripple effect of their union became increasingly evident. Colleagues who had once whispered about the unconventional romance now marveled at the renewed energy that permeated every corner of Drake Enterprises. Emma's influence was celebrated. Her compassionate leadership, her ability to inspire trust and empathy, and her relentless optimism had not only softened the hardened exterior of a brilliant CEO, but had also fostered a culture of authenticity and collaboration. In the quiet evenings that followed, Alexander often found himself reflecting on the incredible journey that had led him from isolation to this very moment of liberation. In the soft glow of twilight, while the city below shimmered like a field of scattered jewels, he would sit by his window and trace the outlines of his memories. There was a peaceful acceptance in his gaze now, a deep-seated knowledge that every scar, every moment of pain, had paved the way to a love that was both fierce and tender. One particular evening, as autumn painted the world in hues of amber and rust, Alexander and Emma hosted a small celebration at the headquarters, a symbolic gathering to honor not only the successful resolution of the company's trials, but also the personal rebirth of a man who had rediscovered life's joy. The intimate event was held in a renovated atrium that had once been a cold testament to business efficiency. Now adorned with fairy lights, soft music, and the fragrant scent of fresh blooms, it had transformed into a sanctuary of celebration and hope. In a quiet moment away from the laughter and soft clinks of champagne glasses, Alexander took Emma's hand in front of their closest colleagues. His voice, steady and heartfelt, rang out in the stillness. "Today I stand before you as a man reborn, a man who learned that the heart's capacity for love and healing is far greater than the desire for solitude. Emma has shown me that vulnerability is not a defeat, but a gateway to a richer, more profound existence. I am grateful for every moment, every challenge that led me here." The applause that followed was not merely for the successful merger or for the renewed vision of Drake Enterprises. It was a celebration of the human spirit, of love's extraordinary power to transform even the most guarded souls. Emma, her eyes glistening with tears of joy and pride, squeezed his hand in silent affirmation. As the celebration faded into the quiet of the night, Alexander and Emma slipped away to the rooftop garden, a secret haven where they had once faced their fears and now together embraced the future. Under a canopy of stars with the cool night air gently caressing their skin, they shared a long, lingering kiss that encapsulated every promise made and every barrier broken. It was a kiss of gratitude, of healing, and of an unyielding belief in the beauty of new beginnings. In that enchanted moment, every hardship of the past melted into insignificance. The once solitary CEO had found not just a partner in love, but a kindred spirit who had illuminated his path to redemption. Their journey had been fraught with obstacles, heartache, and moments of profound uncertainty. But now, with the tender resilience of their love, they stepped boldly into a future replete with hope, passion, and the infinite possibility of healing. Thus, as the first light of dawn painted the horizon with soft promises, Alexander and Emma embraced a new chapter, a chapter where love was celebrated as the most transformative power of all. In each other, they had discovered that every ending is simply the prelude to a beautiful, uncharted beginning. Several months had passed since the transformative night when Alexander and Emma embraced a love that defied the solitude of the past. The seasons had shifted, and with them, a gentle metamorphosis had taken root, not only in the corridors of Drake Enterprises, but within the hearts of the two souls who had dared to love again. On a balmy summer evening, the city's hum softened into a distant lullaby. Alexander's penthouse, once a fortress of isolation, now pulsed with a warm light that reflected the vibrant change within him. In the spacious living area adorned with soft hues and scattered mementos of cherished memories, he and Emma sat side by side on a plush, overstuffed sofa, their hands intertwined in quiet unity. Outside, a meticulously tended garden bloomed under the caress of twilight. Roses, jasmine, and wildflowers wove a tapestry of colour and fragrance, a living reminder of rebirth and hope. "Do you remember?" Emma began softly, her eyes glistening with the recollection of their arduous journey. "The first day you almost didn't let me in?" Alexander chuckled, a sound that now resonated with the tender timbre of genuine joy. "I remember every guarded moment, every wall I thought was impenetrable. But you chipped away at them with your kindness, your unwavering belief that I could heal." His gaze wandered to the delicate interplay of light and shadow dancing on the walls, as if echoing the interplay of their past sorrows and newfound bliss. In that serene moment, the weight of the past seemed to vanish into the night air. The memories of boardroom battles, whispered conspiracies, and the deep loneliness that had once defined him melted away beneath the glow of soft candlelight and the gentle murmur of a piano playing in the background. Here, in the sanctuary of their shared space, Alexander and Emma were not defined by the trials of their former lives, but by the promise of each new day. A day where vulnerability was cherished as the ultimate act of courage and love. They rose together and moved to the balcony, where the cityscape sprawled beneath a velvet sky strewn with stars. The cool night breeze brushed against their skin, carrying with it the subtle sense of night-blooming flowers and the promise of tomorrow. Emma leaned into Alexander's embrace, her head resting gently against his shoulder. "I used to believe that healing was a solitary journey," she whispered, "but with you, every moment becomes a step toward rediscovering joy." Alexander's voice, steady yet tender, replied, "You've shown me that every scar holds a story, and that every story can lead to a beautiful new beginning." In that quiet exchange, the complexity of their pasts transformed into a simple, profound truth. Love had the power to mend even the deepest wounds. As the night deepened, the couple lingered in the gentle intimacy of the balcony, savouring the silence that spoke volumes. They planned dreams in hushed tones, dreams of travelling to sun-drenched coasts, of starting new ventures where creativity and compassion coexisted, and of building a life where every challenge was met with the strength of their united hearts. The epilogue of their past was not an ending, but the prologue of a future filled with endless possibilities. In the soft glow of dawn that awaited them, Alexander and Emma understood that their journey, a path marked by heartbreak, resilience, and ultimately redemption, had prepared them for a life of shared love and unguarded hope. And so, as the first light of a new day began to stretch its gentle fingers across the horizon, they embraced a promise that no matter what uncertainties lay ahead, they would face the world together, their hearts forever entwined in the exquisite dance of vulnerability, passion, and endless renewal.